Catherine, sorry, you're on mute.
Apologies, everybody. I'll start again. Good evening, and thanks very much for joining us. We know that you've had relatively short notice of this meeting, so we're grateful that you've done that. I'm Catherine Martin. I'm Vice Principal for Corporate Services, and I just want to say a few words of introduction before passing over to a number of colleagues who are going to speak to specific issues today. First, I'd just like to acknowledge the challenges of the last few weeks since we last met. A number of you joined one of our 4 town hall meetings around a month ago, and in that time we've seen a peak of COVID cases in the student community. Reduced now, of course, but still a pretty fragile situation, and within a context in which, as you know, cases continue to rise nationally. A number of you have had to self-isolate, either because of quarantine regulations or because you've had the virus yourself or because you've been a close contact of somebody who has. And the support operation that we have put in place has been a really very big and significant operation for us. And we know, and we've said to you previously, that we haven't always got that right. I hope you'll agree that colleagues in accommodation and catering have really made significant improvements in areas like food deliveries and our support for students who are self-isolating. And our statistics that we review frequently do suggest that that is the case. We've worked to improve Wi-Fi connections into our halls of residence. We've provided Ethernet cables where those have been needed, and obviously all of our colleagues continue to work extremely hard to make a positive difference in residence life. Outside your accommodation, we've also made some changes. So we've opened some new study spaces across our campuses to make sure that you have access to safe, physically distanced spaces to continue your work. And also we've opened some new social spaces, notably the Lodge in Bristol Square and also the Spiegel Tent at King's Buildings. We do understand, though, that the limitations placed on all of our lives, and particularly our social lives, mean that this semester is not the experience that many of you hoped for or expected. And particularly those of you in first year at university, that's certainly the case. And some of that frustration, unfortunately, has played out in some very challenging behaviour from a small minority of our students. And that's made some of the fellow students and also some of our staff feel anxious and at times unsafe. Now, your safety and that of all of our colleagues is obviously our top priority. We are here to support you and we want to hear your concerns, whether that's tonight or whether that's at other times when those concerns occur to you. And we want to emphasise again that every one of us has a responsibility to keep ourselves safe and to do nothing that might compromise the safety or well-being of anybody else in our community. We have several colleagues here this evening to speak to you about specific topics. Importantly, we'll hear from Gavin Douglas, who's Deputy Secretary for Student Experience, and from Andy Shanks, who is Director of Student Wellbeing. And they will outline our expectations of you as students, but also outline the support that we provide. We're really fortunate tonight to have been joined by one of our academic experts in coronaviruses. That's Dr. Christine Tate-Burkhard, who will outline the COVID situation in Scotland at the current time and tell us what that must mean for us. We're very grateful to have Inspector Norman Towler from Police Scotland this evening. He's going to talk to us about our individual and collective responsibilities in the community at this difficult time. And we also have with us Professor Dave Robertson, who's Head of the College of Science and Engineering, Gary Jebb, who is Director of Place, Karina Svensson, who's Director of Accommodation, Catering and Events. And there'll be an opportunity at the end for you to ask questions in the second part of the meeting. So please do use the Q&A function to pose your questions and to like other people's questions. Gavin will be coordinating responses to those in the second part of the meeting. Colleagues may well, of course, respond electronically too as we go through the meeting. And as ever, if there are questions that we are unable to answer this evening, then obviously we will gather those up and we'll respond to those as soon as possible after the meeting. So no more from me at the moment. I will pass then to my colleague Christine Tate-Burkhard to talk to us about the COVID situation in Scotland and reiterate my thanks to you for joining us tonight.
So hello everyone, I'm Christine Tate-Burkhard. I'm an assistant professor over at the Roslin Institute, and I've actually been working on coronaviruses for the past 12 years or so. And we're also currently working on SARS coronavirus 2, of course. So as a beginning, I want to just give you a little bit of background on SARS coronavirus 2, just because this is actually what my friends ask me as well. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So COVID, or coronavirus infectious disease 19, is caused by a virus called SARS coronavirus 2, a close relative to a virus that caused an epidemic in 2002-2003 already. Initially, it causes respiratory infection, and that is where it will end for most people. You will have a persistent cough, loss of taste or smell, which is actually very important in young people as a symptom, and an increased temperature or fever. The problem is, in some patients or in some people, it will actually go to a second stage where our immune system kind of fails to deal with this virus and causes an overreaction. And that overreaction leads to severe respiratory distress and can lead to an acute respiratory distress syndrome, and I will talk a bit more in the next slide. The other problem that can also happen, and that is also something we see in young patients particularly, is that our body starts to produce more clotting factors, which can obviously lead to blood clots and strokes in young patients. If we go to the next slide, so acute respiratory distress syndrome is the biggest problem that we obviously see with SARS coronavirus 2, and it can actually also happen in young patients, and we find that some of them actually have a genetic underlying basis for this, but again, it can happen in some young patients. Initially, you will have a very sore chest, and then our immune system starts to produce alarm signals, fluids and cells come into our lungs, and we basically start drowning from the inside. There's now some treatments that we have against that. One of this is dexamethasone, a steroid that stops our immune system from overreacting, but again, it's only helpful in hospitalized patients. We can put people on blood thinners, but that's always risky because they obviously could bleed out internally. So again, this is only in hospital, and a lot of clinical trial treatments that stop viruses from replicating, that help our immune system. But again, all of these treatments are only available in hospital. And the problem is, whilst mostly elderly people die, a lot of young people actually need hospital treatment. And in Scotland, we have increased our ICU capacity from 170 to almost 700 if worst hits the worst, but that still is only enough for 0.01% of the population. So even young people can obviously take up that capacity. So we all need to be careful, and we all need to be careful for others in our society. So the risk, if we go to the next slide, the risk factors of spreading is not everyone spreads coronavirus to the same extent. About 20% of people cause eventually 80% of infections, and especially super spreader events are the biggest problem. We start transmitting the disease quite early before we see symptoms, about 2 days before at least. And 40% of transmission actually occur in that stage. So just be vigilant that you can potentially spread this virus before you're symptomatic. And about another 30% occur on the first day that we actually have symptoms. If we go to the next slide, the biggest risk that we have at the moment is the indoor meeting space, especially badly ventilated spaces. We start to spread the virus throughout these rooms, and gatherings are an important factor where super spreading events can happen. And the very important bit is that the louder we talk, the more droplets we emit into a space, the more filled the space actually gets. And obviously, if we have music or a party, we start talking louder. And alcohol makes us go slightly deaf. We lose about 12 decibels, so we wouldn't hear somebody breathing loudly next to us anymore on 0.3 per mil alcohol. So that's below the legal limit, and that makes us talk louder again. So to the situation in Scotland, if we go to the next slide, as you can see, we have different areas of problems in Scotland on the left-hand side map, but the more important thing is that indeed the cases have started slowing down. We see a slower increase, and actually simply based on case numbers, we're currently just above 1, about 1.04 in the R number. But what you can see in the second graph here is that our hospitalizations are still going up, and that is obviously the biggest risk factor. So our overall R number at the moment is 1.3. If we look at the situation in Edinburgh, it's much more positive actually. Next slide. We have seen a decrease in daily cases, which is really good, and it's also good news on our level in the new Scottish tier system. We are going to be level 3, but there has been an announcement from the First Minister today that we could go into level 2 very soon, which means pubs and bars could open to some extent, and we could actually start meeting with other people, at least outside our households, in those controlled spaces again. Thank you.
Christine, thank you so much for that really fascinating presentation. It's really great to have that deep academic expertise and to be able to share it with our audience today. I'm going to hand over now to Inspector Norman Tyler from Police Scotland, who very kindly joined us to talk through some of the issues that he wants to bring to our attention. So Norman, with gratitude, over to you.
Gavin, thank you very much. Just a small introduction to myself. My name is Norman Taylor. I am the Community Inspector and Deputy Area Commander for the South East of Edinburgh, and I have been in the police for about 22 years, and to say that this has been the most challenging year in my policing career is an understatement, but I think that is shared by everybody. It's a very strange time in all our lives, and it's impactful for us all. Now, in my job, I have I get to speak to everybody here, but last night I was speaking to the Newington Cubs. Now, the Newington Cubs were a great crowd. I actually listened as well, which was lovely. Now, they asked me the same questions. The Newington Cubs asked me about what's the difference between legislation and what's the law and what's guidance. And I got confused, and they did as well. But it's not really confusing. Outside, 6 people, 2 households. Inside, there's no visiting. The Newington Cubs at the end of that understood that. Outside, no more than 6 from 2 households. And inside, they're not allowed to have their pals down to play. That's as simple. Now, the majority of the people who have been complying with the law, and we know that the public confidence in the policing approach has been well received. Our approach throughout this whole pandemic has been using a 4E model, which is engaging with the public, which prior to us all having to wear a mask by legislation was a lot easier because it was a smiley face, explaining the legislation and the guidance, encouraging compliance, which is the main thing, and only using enforcement at very last option. Now, we will continue with that approach, but we will not hesitate to use enforcement action where it is necessary. And I think that's really key. In particular, we won't tolerate blatant disregard to the law, which is in place to help stop the spread of the virus. And we have been using our powers recently to disperse large groups of people at house parties. When dealing with these groups of people who are clearly in breach of the regulations, we will move through the 4Es a little bit more quickly and take enforcement action at our discretion. Now, by taking account of any of these trigger points, a blatant breach, is the size of the gathering a clear breach of the regulations? Is the attitude of those involved clearly showing disregard for the need for these public health measures? I think that's really, really key, folks, is the attitude of everybody. Now, repeat locations and repeat individuals. News Inn, Pollock Halls is a repeat location. We are unfortunately having to speak to the same people time and time again. We will move to enforcement. We don't want to. Please listen to us. Please listen to the community safety team. Now, the public confidence, if we don't do any of this, would the absence of enforcement damage public confidence in the policing? I'll increase that. Would the public confidence damage the reputation of the university who you are representing? I would think they will. Now, the Chief Constable has made it clear that we are asking people to take personal responsibility to do the right thing, and remember the purpose of these measures is to aid the collective effort to stay safe, protect others, save lives by preventing the virus from spreading. The Chief Constable sums it up very well. Now, let's move on to the next step. What happens if that great question that everybody asks? Consequences, what are they? If there is a breach of the legislation and it's a blatant breach and it's a repeat location and we move to enforcement and the attitude isn't correct, we will issue a fixed penalty notice. £60 fine. Next time, £120 fine. Next time, £240 fine. But that also includes a refusing to desist manner, which is arrestable, and you'd be taken to St Leonard's Police Station, just down the road. Now, what we have done in the past are blatant breaches. I think everyone in the press may have seen that there was an Airbnb party in Midlothian, where the party host invited 200 people round to the house. Now, the party host was charged with culpable and reckless conduct. What does that mean? A party host getting charged with culpable and reckless conduct, that's a crime punishable by imprisonment and will stay with you for the rest of your lives. That will inhibit your job prospects and also mean that you won't be able to go and visit some countries. I'm not trying to frighten people, I'm just trying to tell you the facts. Now, this weekend is Halloween, we all know that. I've been fortunate enough to look after the last 4 city centre details over Halloween, and I often hear that Superman's running away from the police. But it's going to be different this year, and we know that. But you've got to remember, we, the police, fire brigade, ambulance, it's one of our busiest days. And with the greatest deal of respect, I don't want to be dealing with you. But we are here to keep you safe. That's our job, and that's what we will continue to do. The community support team and the security will engage with students first and foremost. Please use them, please speak to them. That's what they're there for. They will listen to you, and so we don't have to become involved. Please listen to them. If not, we will have to get involved, and genuinely we don't want to. But we will deal with criminality, and we will deal with it robustly. The other part I think is quite crucial, it's not often touched on, is being a good neighbour. Now, Pollock was empty and the halls have been empty for some time, and all the residents who are here all the time kind of got used to that. And with everybody coming back and the increase in everything that's going on, I would like to say at this point, that's not one of my lot. Yeah, they're not used to the noise levels, they're not used to students being around about. So their tolerance levels are slightly lower. So just think about that when you're going round, when you're walking through the Innocent Tunnel, blaring music, which is one of the largest amplification tunnels around. Just think how that affects other people, please. Now, just before going, I think it would be really remiss to me not to mention the tragic events that happened down in Northumbria, where 4 students tragically died last weekend. Now, they died from drug overdoses and drug-related deaths. Some of them took ketamine. I'm not a medical person, but I think that's used by vets. And some took ecstasy and a mixture of both. They're dead. Now, in Edinburgh, we have something called fake valleys, fake Valium. It kind of explains what they are. They're fake. You don't know what you're taking. You have no idea what you're taking. And we've also seen a trend throughout the country and throughout the UK of dealers attending at halls. If you're seeing someone there who's not there and shouldn't be there, I'm not asking you to tell tales. All I'm asking you to do is try and save someone's life. Gavin, I hope that really sums it up. If there's any questions later on, I'll be more than happy to take them.
Norman, thanks very much indeed for that very straightforward and of course very sobering series of messages, but very clear and very helpful. I'd like to promise that I am going to be the light relief in contrast to Norman. Unfortunately, that's not the case. My job as Deputy Secretary Student Experience, my job is really to try and work on initiatives to improve the student experience and student services. Unfortunately, at the moment, I'm spending rather a lot of time writing to you about disciplinary matters, and I am going to carry on with the slightly sobering theme of student discipline before we reach the sort of latter stages of the presentation. So next slide, please. So, I mean, I'm hoping that by now you've had a chance to see the Good Citizen Guide we produced at the start of this year, setting out what we call the guidelines for our community during times of pandemic. And you'll recognise those messages are very similar to the ones that Norman's just shared with us, that it's all of our responsibility to slow down the spread of the coronavirus, mine, Norman's, yours as students, everybody on this panel's responsibility, that we all have a duty, and we always have had a duty to help ensure the safety and well-being of everyone on campus. It's a legal requirement, that, but as Norman has pointed out, we have a responsibility to the wider community as well, whether that is noise in the Innocent Tunnel or whether it is spreading infection in the wider community. And as a result, we all need this year to act with a renewed level of personal awareness and responsibility at all times. Next slide, please. The problem is that a minority of Edinburgh students have not been following these guidance. In fact, they've been ignoring the rules. And the kind of things I'm talking about are parties, whether those are parties in accommodation or outside accommodation, gatherings. We've heard about the Innocent Tunnel there, on the meadows, down the beach and so on. Setting off malicious fire alarms or refusal to wear face masks in libraries, these sort of things. And these are all problematic because they go against the rules, they go against the guidance, and of course, ultimately, they increase the likelihood of the transmission of COVID-19, and that is the one thing that we're trying to avoid. But as well as that, it's fair to say that other people may not feel safe. Of those students who have decided to leave University of Edinburgh accommodation this semester, 30%, so roughly speaking 1 in 3, have said they're doing that because they don't feel safe in university accommodation, and that is tragic. That should not be the case. Even if there's a belief in some parts of the population that COVID doesn't hurt young people, and we just heard from Christine a few slides back that it can hurt young people, but nonetheless, even if you believe that, there's an increased risk to university staff. We've got cleaners, we've got security staff, we've got all sorts of people who work in close contact with you in our accommodation, and it's important that they are kept safe. It's really important they're kept safe. It is their right to be safe at work. I think discipline is becoming a distraction from more important issues. We've got great teams of people in our accommodation team and our residence life team who are there to help you, to support you in times of difficulty, to help you make friends, to enjoy life. And they're finding themselves spending more and more time on discipline, which is not the best way to make use of their expertise. And frankly, I think we're wasting police time when the police have to come onto campus to sort out problems in Pollock halls or other university accommodation. That is an inexcusable waste of police time, which should be used to deal with more serious matters. Next slide, please. So what does it mean if you ignore the rules in university terms? We've just heard what it might mean in police terms, in legal terms. Well, in the university, we abide by the Code of Student Conduct. That hyperlink there will work, so if you want to go and look at it later on, please do that. But the Code of Student Conduct covers a number of things which are possible offences. The two relevant ones here are that you might be behaving in a way likely to cause injury or to impair safety, or simply that you're failing to comply with any university rule, regulation or policy. And just to be clear, Norman there gave us a good sense of what the criminal and police-based sanctions might be. Within the university, if you are found to have held a party in your room or set up a fire alarm, it's a first-time offence, it's a fine of up to £150. If it's a repeat offence, it's a referral to the Student Discipline Committee, who have access to a much wider range of sanctions, up to and including suspension and exclusion. And if it's abusive language or assault of our staff, that will be an automatic referral to the Student Discipline Committee, and indeed if it's an assault it may also be referred to Police Scotland as a criminal act, and of course the sanctions available there also include suspension and exclusion. So we obviously take the safety and security of our staff very seriously, as we take the safety and security of you very seriously, and anything that goes against that will be dealt with in the most severe way. I should point out that this week so far 4 students have started on that process of formal discipline proceedings, and I would really urge you not to add to those numbers by behaviour over Halloween. Next slide, please. So in summary, as Norman has said, Halloween, a busy time of year traditionally, a time of year for parties and fun. It can't be that way this year. We want you to enjoy Halloween, but you'll have to do it in a safe way by staying at home. And I know that's not much fun compared to the old way of doing it. But, and pun very much intended, don't lose your head this Halloween. Stick to the rules. Don't be a COVID-idiot. Don't get in trouble with the police, because the police will be on campus and our residential campuses throughout the weekend. We will have enhanced security across the campuses at the weekend. We want to keep you safe, but we need you to play your part and be the great majority who stick to the rules and keep everybody else safe. I'm going to pass on now to Andy Shanks, who's Director of Student Wellbeing, who's going to talk a little bit more about the support available to you, and particularly the increased support we've been putting in place since the start of this outbreak and the increased numbers of you having to self-isolate. So Andy, over to you.
Thank you, Gavin. So moving on to my first slide. My name is Andy Shanks. I'm Director of Student Wellbeing here at the university. So amongst other things, I manage the Student Counselling Service, the Student Disability Service, the Chaplaincy, and more recently the Residence Life Service. These are very challenging times due to the pandemic, and we realise that this experience here at the moment is probably not what you'd hoped for or what you were expecting when you applied to the University of Edinburgh. So we do know that this is a very difficult time for you, and the pandemic has had a significant impact on many of you in a whole load of different ways. You might be feeling isolated, bored, lonely, and you may feel that you're spending too much time in front of a screen. So I wanted to reassure you tonight that we have a great deal of support available for you here at the university in different formats. So in person, online, over the phone, and in person, face-to-face on campus. I've seen a couple of questions about mental health support in the chat, and hopefully what I'm going to say this evening will help to reassure you that we do have mental health support available, and I'll put a couple of links up in the chat later on in response to some of those questions. So we're doing as much as we can to support your mental health and well-being, and I'll come on to those services on my second slide. We're not here to replace the NHS, but we work very closely with NHS services when students are struggling and need to see mental health specialists. We have a great online programme of events and activities currently, including live fitness and exercise classes. We've tried hard to communicate those across the university. I don't know whether you've seen information on them, but I've embedded a link on my next slide for you to access those resources. And we're working in partnership with the Sports Union, the Sport and Exercise Department, the Student Association and Residence Life to look at how we can organise more activities and events outdoors when the regulations and guidance allows us to do so. Now that the majority of you are no longer self-isolating, although I realise that some of you are, please remember that staying active, going for a walk or a run, having a healthy diet, sleeping well and maintaining a good balance in your life will enable you to stay healthy and to feel well. So moving on to my second slide. There's a whole range of different support for you here at the university. Each of you as undergraduates or postgraduate taught students will have a personal tutor assigned to you. They're a good point of contact for you if you've got questions about your course, or even if you're struggling with your mental health, they'll be able to signpost you to the right services, as will the student support teams in your school. All 22 schools and deaneries have a student support team, and as well as helping you with things like special circumstances and course choices, they can also signpost you to our support services, our mental health and wellbeing services. We work very closely with all of the student support teams across the university. Our health and wellbeing services are delivered very much in a hybrid model. On the right here, I've got the motifs from 3 online platforms that we use. The Feeling Good app is used by thousands of people across the UK, and it supports users with depression and anxiety, and outcomes are extremely positive. Silver Cloud is an online cognitive behavioural therapy platform, and Together All is an online community for people to share stories, share their experiences of how they're feeling, but also to receive peer support from other people. All 3 of these online platforms are accessible through the Student Counselling Service webpage. They're all free, they're all confidential, and they're all evidence-based, so there's evidence that they demonstrate good outcomes for people that use them. I'd encourage you all to register with a GP, a general practitioner here in Edinburgh, That's the gateway to specialist physical health and mental health services. Residence Life operate in all of our university student accommodation units, and again, they're a good first point of contact if you feel you're struggling with a situation, and they can very quickly escalate your situation through to our student counselling service, who, as I say, are delivering online and in-person services. We've got probably the biggest student counselling service in Scotland. It's well resourced. We've just been given permission to recruit to another 5.5 posts, which we're going to do as quickly as we can. Currently, we're receiving over 100 referrals a week, and we're seeing students. In fact, we've seen 95% of students within 2 weeks for assessment so far. And if a situation is more urgent, we can often get in contact with you and speak with you or see you the same day or the day after. And again, escalate your situation if it's a serious mental health situation. The Student Disability Service work with people who have long-term mental health conditions, as well as those who have protected characteristics within the Equality Act, so visual impairment, hearing impairment, etc. Our chaplaincy works with students of faith, but also with any student who needs support and gets in contact with them. And as well as delivering mindfulness, yoga and Tai Chi free of charge for all students, we have a listening service which is contactable 24 hours a day, out of hours, through the University Security Service, phone number of which is on the back of your library card, your student card. We are based in the Health and Wellbeing Centre on Bristol Square, and we also deliver support currently at King's Buildings in Murchison House, and the chaplaincy has its location up on the corner of Bristol Square next to Potter Row. As a final point, I want to address the students who haven't yet come forward for support. So if you need support for your mental health, or if you've experienced any sort of assault, whether that's racial, sexual, or other form of harassment, then please do come forward to the advice place or one of the student support services. We'll work with you to identify how best to support you, and we'll treat your situation as fully confidential. So Gavin, that's the key points that I wanted to cover. I'll hand back to you.
Andy, thanks very much for that useful survey and reminder of the accessibility of these important services. Much appreciated. Our final speaker today is Professor Dave Robertson. Dave is formerly the head of the School of Informatics, now the head of the entire College of Science and Engineering. And Dave, would you like to give us a few closing words, please?
Okay, so just a few words from the academic side of things, and I wish I could see you all so that I would get a rough idea of whether you're first year or second year, wherever you are. I think just a few thoughts, actually. And I'm talking not just as an academic, but as somebody who has kids, actually, who are at university. Two of my sons are at university, so they're going through a similar sort of thing, not at Edinburgh, though, because they don't want to be with anywhere near where their father works. First thought is really to do with the academic side of things. I think what you have to realize is that I'm from science and engineering, and so you think we're quite far distant from the fight against COVID, but in fact we're not. So we're doing quite a lot of stuff that's actually very, very directly relevant. We're doing stuff on figuring out how masks can work well. We're doing stuff on figuring out what the mechanics of doing testing that would actually be economical might be. I personally am the director of Health Data Research Scotland, so we're doing a lot on the data side of things, being able to figure out what on earth is going on with people coming into hospitals and all of those sort of things, moving data around quickly, trying to get it to the point of clinical care so people can make decisions. So my point is, a lot of the people you're working with, they aren't passive. They're actually trying to do things about the COVID pandemic right here in Edinburgh. And even if they weren't those people, they would have been the people that have just spent 6 months trying to make sure that we can do the very best we can to push out the right kind of material to you wherever you are, depending on the circumstances. It's been a real stretch, and people like Gavin, actually, who is unfortunately in the role of being quite authoritarian, have been hugely helpful in trying to get us to that position where we can actually make sure that we're doing something that's keeping you going and keeping you in good shape academically as we go through. and it's not been easy. It's definitely not easy for you, and it's definitely not easy for us. And it is, from where I sit, one big experiment. We've never done this sort of thing before. I said at the beginning, 6 months ago, we'd end up with some stuff being a lot better than it was before, and some stuff where we wanted to revise. I think that's precisely correct. We'll learn a bit as we go through here. We'll do more as we go through in the second semester. If you're a science and engineering person and you're looking forward to labs, we are thinking very carefully about how to get that to work. But we've got to do it safely. And that's the other bit. I mean, with my other hat on, Health Data Research UK, I've spent a bit of time in intensive care units. You don't want to be there. You don't want to put people there, actually. They're really quite unpleasant places. We do have a responsibility not to do that. When I was first year in university, I ran a drinking club, actually, would you believe? And it was completely innocuous because you were very unlikely to do any harm to anybody other than yourself. But this is not that. You're very, very likely to do harm to others if you're not careful. So there is, I'm afraid, an extra responsibility, and it's on everybody. It's not just on you. It's on me. It's on everybody. So I do hope that you can just throttle back a little bit in order to get us over this particular bump. If you do, then I think one of the really positive things that will come out of this, certainly in science and engineering, I believe, I can't really speak for the humanities. I'm not an expert, but I believe that to be true in the humanities, definitely true in medicine. I spent 3 years of my life in medicine. It's definitely true that these disciplines will be changed fairly radically as a consequence. And one of the advantages that you do have that I wouldn't have had when I was in university is that you can learn to be part of that. And with these radical changes that the economy, society, science, if you're at a place like Edinburgh, and Edinburgh is one of the top universities in the world, you could be one of the people who actually helps to change things a lot for the better. And you should think about that, actually. You've got, depending on which degrees you're doing, you've got 1 year, 3 years, 4 years, whatever it is. You could be coming out and doing those sorts of things. And that's something I never thought about when I was first year undergraduate 35 years ago, or more, actually. And now it's actually a real possibility with the pace of change in science and in society. So I don't want to burden you with these sorts of rather heavy thoughts, but it is something worth thinking about, and it's certainly not something worth throwing away because Guy Fawkes is really nice. So hopefully you give a little bit of thought to that. Keep optimistic because I certainly am, and I think if you're like my sons, continue to enjoy your academic career, despite the fact it's being delivered in a slightly different way.
Dave, many thanks, and indeed many thanks to all our speakers. We're going to move now to the final stage of the town hall, which is the questions and answers. And to those of you who've been involved in a town hall before, what we'll do is we'll work through the questions in order of the most liked. So we'll try and take the most popular questions first. If there are any questions left at the end that we haven't had a chance to answer, we'll answer those offline and post all the questions and answers in a SharePoint site for you to have a look at. So the most liked question so far with 13 likes says, it appears there's more money being spent on extra security to try and lock students down rather than any comprehensive mental health support. Well, let me say, first of all, that I think we all would rather not be spending any money to try and keep people safe and lock people down. And we always have a need for security, but it's unfortunate we need more security now than we have in the past. It would be absolutely great if we had no need for extra security and we didn't have these disciplinary problems. But I can also say that we're spending an extra £1.7 million on mental health over the next 24 months, and that includes £750,000 extra this year. That's more counsellors, more mindfulness, more listening service, and additional services being rolled out later in the year for BME students and so on. So there's a lot of money being spent on additional mental health support. The university is highly committed to that, and it's doing that with hard cash. So I can't tell you, in all honesty, whether we spend more on mental health support than security. I suspect we do, but we're spending a lot more on mental health support over the next 24 months, and that's starting right now. The next most popular question with 12 likes says, if the university is so concerned with COVID, why did they ask us to come back? Is it all about the money? No, it's not. Genuinely, it's not all about the money. I've sat in many sort of the discussions about the plans for this year, and money and the need to have students on campus to make money has never been mentioned once. I'm going to probably bring Dave back into this, because I think the answer is that we believe it is the best possible way for students to learn. We're not an online university, although we have expertise in aspects of online education. You know, we are a university located in the city of Edinburgh, and we believe that's the best way for our students, the best place for our students to be. But Dave, would you like, as our sort of senior academic colleague, would you like to sort of have a stab at that particular question? Yeah,
it's an experiment for all of us. So let me take an example. Engineering is my favorite example. I don't know if there are any engineers in the audience, because it's impossible to know. But one of the things we do in engineering is we try to give people choice. I actually believe this is an important thing for life. What's the most important thing you can have? Choice. So we try to provide various options for being educated. One of them is residential. You can turn up and do your lectures. Another option is online, and there are various intermediate options involving all sorts of flipped classroom activities and so on. And actually, in engineering at least, we're finding the online stuff at the moment, I actually don't think this will persist. I think it will change, is more popular. Over time, I think that's going to flip back as the weather improves and hopefully as COVID becomes less important and so on. But I think the most important thing is to be as malleable and adaptive as you possibly can. We're trying to be. And then what we hope is that because of the close linkage into your home schools and the people you deal with, and you will get to, even online, you get to know people, that you just drawn closer, and it pulls you closer into us and the people who are actually really interested in doing your education, and we work out a common happy medium for all of this. But the important point to realize is the very fact that you've been able to get so much of an education already is because we were so adaptive over the 6 months before you came. Had we just thought it could only be residential, you wouldn't get much education at all. Same would be true if we thought it was entirely online. Very little of great interest would have happened. But we deliberately designed it to be adaptive so that we could adapt to you. I don't know if that's enough, Gavin.
No, I think that's very helpful. It's a difficult question to answer, but it's a very helpful explanation from you, Dave. So thank you for stepping in at that point. I'm going to take I see a question has now risen up in popularity. Somebody's saying that the presentation is increasingly aggressive and threatening with a lot of confrontational language. It seems like the mass of students are being demonized. There's little regard for how hard it actually is for us in accommodation. I suppose, look, I started my presentation by saying that my job is Deputy Secretary of Student Experience, and what I am actually here to do is to improve the student experience in all the ways I can. And I talked about how many of our staff, our accommodation staff, our residence life staff are here to support students, build community, support students with mental health and so on. And I started both that presentation by saying that I thought it was unfortunate that many of our staff are spending more time on discipline right now than they are on the support. And that's true for me as well as for a number of the other colleagues on the call. So I'm sorry if it comes across aggressive and threatening. We do have a discipline problem in some of our university accommodation at the moment. We heard that from our Police Scotland colleague, that we are regarded as a somewhat problematic site at the moment where there's repeat behaviour. And a typical night, we are getting reports of between 10 and 15 parties or gatherings in university accommodation that are against the guidance. So we have to get to grips with this, guys. We can get to grips with this, then we can just step away from it. And we're trying to lay out very clearly to the minority of students who are transgressing that there are going to be consequences for this, because we can't let this carry on. And I'm sorry that comes across as being heavy-handed and confrontational. We do understand and are deeply committed to sorting out these issues, both discipline but also student support. And that's why this particular presentation has been structured in that way today. Somebody's asked a question saying, what authority does the university have to issue fines? Are they legally binding? How many fines have actually been issued and how many have actually been paid by students? So When you enrol as a student at the University of Edinburgh, you put yourself under the authority of the Senatus Academicus. You actually sign up to something called the Sponsio Academico, all in Latin, given our ancient roots. But by doing that, you put yourself under the authority of the Academic Senate, and the Academic Senate has authority for maintaining discipline in the university, and that's quite well established in its legal ordinances. So basically, Senate has approved the Code of Student Conduct that I referred to earlier on. Code of Student Conduct sets out the different sort of sanctions that are available to discipline officers in the university, and that's where the authority to impose fines actually comes from. Are they legally binding? They're not legally binding in the same way that a police fine is, but they are binding within the university context. So if you don't pay a fine, you're likely to face further consequences under the Code of Student Conduct. How many fines have actually been issued? I only have the data up till the middle of October, but as of the middle of October, over 160 fines had been issued. And I'm afraid I don't know off the top of my head how many have actually been paid by students, but they do need to be paid, I'm afraid. That is the way it works. A question which is perhaps a little hard to understand, but Norman might have a crack at it. It says, "Dear Inspector, when dishing out fines, how can we prove that we are not at the party?" Norman, do you want to try to answer that one? It's almost a philosophical question, I suspect, but what's the process? If somebody says you feel that they've been fined unfairly, how does that process work? I guess is the question.
To answer the question, it's quite simple. Don't be there. Yeah. How can we prove you're not at a party? Well, don't be at the party. That would be the first one. But in the bigger scale of things, I'm going to go back to, I don't want to sound aggressive. I want to sound factual. And I'm going to start off with the majority of people are complying. The majority are. It's the small minority that aren't and are causing issues. And it's causing issues for the university, it's causing issues for the neighbourhood, it's causing issues for everybody. Now, if there is a party and it's in one household, legally that's allowed. However, you've got to bear in mind you're being a good neighbour. Think about the noise, think about the disruption it's causing, think about that way. So just bear in mind those little ones, but to answer the question of how can we prove we're not there, don't be there.
Okay, thank you, Norm. Okay. So the next question is about Christmas, and I suspect there might be a couple of other questions later on about Christmas as well. So let me talk a little bit about Christmas. People are saying, are we going to be allowed to go home? Are we going to be stuck in accommodation over Christmas? That was Donald's question. It's had 10 likes so far. The situation for Christmas remains a little unclear as things currently stand. You may have heard different pronouncements or different announcements from the Scottish Government. One most recently, I think, from John Swinney, the Deputy First Minister, saying it may be that students are not able to go home at Christmas, but other announcements saying much more positive things like, we think it is really important for students to be allowed to go home at Christmas. That's a view, by the way, that we would support entirely at the university. And there have been some tentative suggestions coming forward, which you may have seen about everybody should self-isolate for 2 weeks at the end of term before going home for Christmas and so on and so on. So there's a lot of thinking going on in the Scottish Government at the moment, and indeed in the other UK governments, the Northern Irish Assembly, the Welsh Assembly and the Westminster governments, to work out at a national level across the four nations, how can students be safely allowed to go home at Christmas without leading to a further spread of COVID across the nation? Because of course we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people moving around the country in a short period of time. There's no decision at this stage. Our view is that we would like as many people who want to go home for Christmas to be able to do so safely. We are engaging at every level from Peter Matheson, the principal, downwards with the Scottish Government on their emerging and developing plans. And we will continue to represent our views strongly to them about the best way to make this happen, about the importance of people being able to go home for Christmas if they can. So we don't have a clear answer yet. But we are working hard on it, and ultimately it will be guidance from the Scottish Government and the other governments that determine the rules. We're keeping our fingers very firmly crossed that as many of you as possible who want to go home for Christmas will be able to do so. I think there was a question further up, but it may have been answered already by Karina about being stuck in Edinburgh for Christmas. Karina, I know you've answered it, but perhaps just to bring you in briefly to sort of explain the answer a bit further, if you could, about what happens if people can't go home for Christmas, because we recognise that it might be challenging, perhaps particularly for international students this year.
Yeah, so of course our wish is that everyone that wants to go home for Christmas can do so, but of course it's a little bit out of our hands. So if we should find ourselves in a situation where there is restrictions on travel, or for any other reason a student cannot or choose to stay in Edinburgh over Christmas, we are working on plans so that we can look after our students over Christmas, whether it is with food and Christmas dinners, or whether it's social activities virtually, or in a way that we can socially distance and do activities face to face. That's a program that we are working up at the moment together with our colleagues in Residence Life. So I can't give you full details on it yet, but we are preparing for it should we be in that situation. But of course we are hoping that those students that want to go home for Christmas can do so.
Thanks, Karina. That's really good to hear, and I think we'll answer a couple of the questions further up as well.
There is one other question, Gavin, that I can answer, which is about how having parties within the household. So when I'm live now, if that's okay. So if you live in a household that has a pantry that allows 6 people, and it's very clearly marked outside our pantries how many people can be in a pantry. So some of our households has larger pantries, some are smaller. But if you have a pantry that is large enough to hold a group in your household, you are allowed to socialize with that group. You're not allowed to have any parties within your household unless it has been approved by your warden. So if you want to hold a household party of 6 people in a pantry where you are allowed to have 6 people, then you need to seek permission from your warden. The reason why we're doing that, and you're asking that question, is also to look after other students that live in the surrounding area or in the household that may not want to have a party, so that we can look after them from a noise perspective and ensure that everyone feels safe. So that's why you have to ask for permission before you have a party. But in a space where you can be a certain amount of people in your household, you can get together and socialize.
That's really helpful, Karina. So thank you very much for stepping in to clarify that. So I'm looking at a comment here. It says, easy for adults who live at home with their own families to complain about students who are living in often less than satisfactory conditions in halls with people they may not get on with, very little regard for mental health, a lack of perspective, as if everyone is in the same position. I understand that comment. I'm speaking to you from my spare bedroom. I'm living at home with my wife, and that is a different situation to somebody who's living in a hall with a group of students who you may not know very well, and you may be struggling with issues around the Wi-Fi or whatever else it might be. So I accept that I am certainly coming from a different perspective, but what we're not doing is just sitting in our spare bedrooms or our living rooms pontificating about this. We have many staff who are living on campus, residence assistants, wardens and so on, as Karina has just mentioned, who live directly on our accommodation, are taking part in that experience. We have many staff who work on our residential estates and who support students on residential estates, as our cleaners, security staff and so on. So everything that we're saying is informed by the views of those people as well as our own views. And so it's not quite fair to say that we're just sitting here with a different perspective, although I recognise it is true. I certainly have a different perspective. I'm not in a hall of residence, but we are listening to the views of students, of residence life teams, of other accommodation and catering teams who are working in those residences, and that's informed our decision to have this town hall today. So that's dealt with the question about parties that Karina mentioned. The question here, if our flatmate had a party and we'd have to leave the flat to avoid being fined, would you expect us to sit outside in the cold to avoid being fined? What would you suggest us to do? Karina, I wonder whether there is an answer there. I mean, obviously, speaking for where I'm sitting, I'd say, is it possible to speak to your flatmates and encourage them not to have the party? Or if the party has been arranged legitimately, as Karina has suggested, then there's no problem being part of that party. I guess what you're saying is, your flatmates had a party, they've invited people from outside, that's against the guidance, and therefore you now risk being fined. What should somebody do in that situation, Karina, do you think?
So you're absolutely right. Having people from the outside into your household, of course, is not allowed at the moment, so that should not happen. There's various ways that this can be dealt with. Obviously, you can speak to your household and explain that you are not comfortable with this. They may or may not listen, so I appreciate that that doesn't always work. Of course, you can report it to us should you wish to do so. That's not always easy, so I appreciate that no one wants to be the one that tells on the rest of the household. If a household is fined, of course, there is also an appeal process in there as well. So it doesn't mean that you cannot appeal and say, I was not part of this, I was in my room at all the time and I did not join the party. So there is various ways that you can communicate with us without necessarily just going to say, stop this now and be the one in the household that doesn't want to be part of the party. So I think communication there is key, and we are here to listen. And I know there's been some comments about we don't answer emails, so please let us know which emails are not being answered so we can follow that up. There's many communication emails that is available out there, so just so that we know exactly which one to address. But please communicate with us, and there is always an appeal process. If you have not joined the party, then we understand that it's not right that you should be charged a penalty.
Karina, thank you very much for that. And then we're running low on time, guys, and this is going to be the last question I'm going to try and answer. I'm going to give it to Dave to answer, and I think it's an important one that we try and address. Somebody is saying that they've heard everything's going to be online next semester, and is that true? And there's a bit more in that question, but I think it's really important we try and address that particular issue. So Dave, would you like to say something about something from your perspective as a head of college, whether you would like to comment on that worry?
Right. So subject to government regulations and guidelines, of course, if they made it impossible for us to have people on campus, then that would be a different story. But assuming that doesn't happen, the answer is no from science and engineering. And the reason why I can be so categorical is because an awful lot in science and engineering, an awful lot of our subjects are lab-based. We can do some lab teaching that is off campus, and we're doing various creative things. Actually, the most creative one I've heard is in physics, where somebody apparently has a lab experiment that he's been able to kind of outsource out to students who couldn't actually get in. But we much prefer for you to come in and work in the labs, and we've been trying to this semester to push more of the final year students, the honours students who absolutely need to be in the labs to finish their degrees through in the first semester, precisely so that we can get you in the second semester. So we're working as hard as we possibly can to get you in on campus. And when I talk to people, I mentioned this before when I was giving my general talk. When I talk to people who are doing some of the teaching, their greatest regret is that they don't have more people in on campus for the synchronous teaching. Now, of course, we can't have everybody because there is not enough space. And actually, I don't think you all want to be there, because for a lot of you, actually, maybe it's easier to do some of the stuff online, and that's great if that works for you. But our plans in second semester are to have you on campus as much as we reasonably can for the reasons I described.
Dave, okay, thanks very much for that. So, folks, we're now at the end of the town hall. We're out of time. I know we haven't managed to answer all those questions, but as I said before, we will make sure we get through those questions and publish answers to them. Some of them have got quite some specific questions, and we'll deal with those. We'll publish those answers. Thank you for coming today. There will be further town halls, by the way. The Student Association are arranging town halls next week, at which a number of senior colleagues will be present, including Colm Harmon, Vice Principal Students, and Peter Maston, Principal. So watch out for details of those if you want to carry on engaging with the university's senior management. Thank you for coming. Thank you to our speakers. Particular thanks to Inspector Norman Towner from Police Scotland, who's given up time to come in and speak to us. Really appreciate his input today. So to finish off, I do hope you have a safe but enjoyable Halloween, and I look forward to seeing you or engaging with you at a future town hall in the near future. Thanks very much, and good night.